Hi friends! Since 2022 is nearly over, I thought I would try making an end of the year album list. I originally planned on making this a top 10, but it just didn't feel like enough, so I decided to make a list of my top 22 albums of 2022. I'll go through numbers 22 to 11 relatively quickly, and then I'll talk a little more in depth about my top 10. But first, I just want to say, just because an album isn't on this list, it doesn't mean I don't think it's good. When I first started making this list, 22 albums felt like a lot. Turns out it's not, because there are many albums I love this year that didn't make it. There's also lots of music that I haven't heard. At the end of the day, this is my list, so it's going to look different than yours. I would love it if you let me know what your favorite albums of 2022 were. With that being said, let's get started. Alright, at number 22, I have Giving the World Away by Hatchie. I don't really have a fancy or dramatic way of explaining why I love this album. I love dream pop and shoegaze, and I'm always up for a 90s throwback. This album has an abundance of catchy hooks, it's fun to listen to. I've had this Enchanted on repeat lately. By the way, I'm going to make a Spotify playlist of my favorite tracks from all of these albums, and I will link it in the description. If you haven't heard them yet, I would obviously highly recommend checking them out. Next up is Ugly Season by Perfume Genius. This album somehow pulls off being unsettling and serene at the same time. This is a bizarre experience of an album. It's unlike anything else I've heard. Check out Photograph if you haven't already. It's one of my favorite songs of the year. At number 20, I Didn't Mean to Haunt You by Quadeca. The production and storytelling on this album really impressed me. I feel like it goes without saying that this really moved me. I cried the first time I heard it, and maybe more times after that. My favorite track is How Settling. Next is Melt My Eyes, See Your Future by Denzel Curry. Each track here feels unique and shows off his versatility, but they also flow together so nicely. I also love how thoughtful and introspective the lyrics are. The production here is incredible. My favorite track is Walkin. At number 18, I Love You Jennifer B by Jockstrap. This is a wacky, chaotic pop album. There are more creative ideas going into this debut album than a lot of artists have in their entire careers. Check out Greatest Hits if you haven't already. Moving on to You Belong There by Daniel Rossen. The atmosphere of this album is gorgeous. It sounds immaculate. It's comforting, but there's enough experimentation going on to keep it interesting and to add a bit of darkness to the music. Check out the song Unpeopled Spaces if you haven't already. Next up is Dawn FM by The Weeknd. I love the radio station concept and how it works with the 80s synth pop sound. I appreciate how cohesive and focused this album feels. Also, as expected, the production is incredible, and his voice suits this kind of music perfectly. My favorite track as of right now is Sacrifice. Number 15, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick set himself a bar that's basically impossible to reach, especially with the 5 years of build-up, but I'm happy with this album. There's a lot going on with this one. I feel like there's something here for everyone to enjoy. Also, I feel like this goes without saying, but it's amazing lyrically. The track Mother I Sober has been my favorite since the day this came out. At number 14, MOTOMAMI by ROSALIA. I fell in love with the sound of this album right away, but then I followed along with the translated lyrics since I don't speak Spanish, and I fell even harder. The production here is kind of off the walls, and there's enough interesting genre blending going on to keep me interested the whole time. The opener Saoko is the most standout track to me. Next is Blue Rev by Alvvays. This is just so enjoyable from beginning to end. I love how the catchy pop songwriting mixes with the heavier shoegaze production. I find it has a lot of replay value. These songs are very addictive. Even on first listen, it felt like I knew this music my whole life. It's so nostalgic. My favorite track right now is Belinda Says. Moving on to The Forever Story by Jid. The lyricism and storytelling are next level. The performances are also top notch. It's equal parts entertaining and thoughtful. My favorite track is System. And for number 11, I picked CAPRISONGS by FKA Twigs. I know this technically isn't an album, but I'm including it anyways, I don't care. This has been in such heavy rotation for me this year, and I still get as much enjoyment out of it now as I did the first time I heard it. The energy here here is just so infectious. Poppy Bones is probably my favorite track. Alright, for number 10, I picked Dragon New Warm Mountain I Believe in You by Big Thief. Something unique that I love about this album is that it feels very off the cuff. You can tell that there's still a lot of passion and emotion behind these songs. They're very human and very real and have so much character. The cover art for this album is so fitting. It feels like you're sitting around the fire with your friends or anthropomorphic animals and you're talking about your feelings, and there just happens to be some pretty great folk music playing in the background. It doesn't seem overly rehearsed, but please don't take that the wrong way because there is so much talent going on here. They are incredible musicians, and I truly feel like Adrienne Lenker is one of the greatest songwriters. The lyrics can have me crying one minute and smiling to myself the next. This album is so cozy and it's so easy to get lost in. I want to jump into this music and live in it. Basically, Dragon New Warm Mountain I Believe in You is a warm hug that lasts 80 minutes, and when you finally pull away, you feel like it somehow made you a better person. My favorite track as of right now is Simulation Swarm. I also love Little Things and the opening track Change. Next up at number 9 is Preacher's Daughter by Ethel Cain. On first listen, I thought this album was good. Then I read through the lyrics and discovered the concept behind this album, and it is harrowing, and then I was fully sold. The songs talk about trauma the narrator has that's associated with her family, with her complicated views on religion, drug use, exploitation, abusive relationships, her eventual death, and a word that I don't think I'm allowed to say on YouTube. It feels like it's probably one of their no-no words, but I guess you can go discover for yourself. This album feels like more than just music. It feels like a movie with the best soundtrack ever. The reverb on this album reminds me of the echo inside an empty church, which helps enhance the concept for me. This album perfectly captures the feeling of loneliness and isolation. It's a genuinely haunting experience if you give it the attention it deserves. The vocals are beautiful and the atmosphere is unsettling. This album is quite long, but honestly, almost all of the songs are highlights to me. Let's just say I don't think any of the runtime is wasted. It's a slow burn, but it definitely pays off, and I think it adds to the eeriness. Considering this is just her debut album, I can't wait to see what Ethel Cain does next. The best track here for me is Ptolemaea. That song is genuinely scary and one of the most memorable songs I've heard all year. Other than that, I'd recommend checking out Thoroughfare and Sun-Bleached Flies. At number 8, No Thank You by Little Simz. So hear me out. I know it might seem impulsive to put an album that just came out this week at number 8, but to be honest, I feel like it should probably be higher, and I'm just holding back and playing it safe because I haven't had as much time with it as the other albums here. This album is a prime example of why publications need to stop making Album of the Year lists at the beginning of December. Fools. Little Simz did it again. Just like her last album, the use of orchestra and choir on this album make for some gorgeous sounding music, but this is definitely more laid back and down to earth than Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. There are definitely similarities, but it doesn't feel accurate to treat this like it's just a B-sides album. Many of the tracks on this album are long, like 6 to 7 minutes long, but they work and they're interesting all the way through because she's just that good. I love how this album is basically just a huge middle finger to the music industry, both lyrically but also in general. She released this album on a random Monday in December, knowing full well that it wouldn't make it to most end of the year lists, and she's fine with it because she doesn't need it. I am tired of hearing about how Little Simz is one of the best female rappers. She's one of the best rappers, period. She just put out one of the greatest 3 album runs ever. This could definitely change, but as of right now, my favorite track is Heart on Fire. I also want to mention Angel and Broken. At number 7, Renaissance by Beyonce. This album is fun from start to finish, and it does not give you a minute to breathe. Each song is filled to the brim with energy and personality. Not a single second is wasted on this one. It is relentlessly enjoyable to the point where it's almost too much to handle. The transitions are seamless, which makes sense considering this is a house album. I wanted to go as far as saying that this felt like listening to one long song, but that wouldn't be accurate because as much as this is a cohesive experience of an album, It is sonically diverse and will not let you get bored. It sounds incredible. The production is top notch. I don't think I need to point out that the vocals are great, but I will anyways. As for the subject matter, obviously I am all for self-love, but a lot of music about self-love feels very corny and patronizing to me. Not in this case though. This music is infectiously positive in a way that doesn't feel forced. This music actually genuinely puts me in a good mood, and for that, I think it deserves a lot of praise. Beyonce really came back with a bang with this one. My favorite track is Virgo's Groove. I'm addicted to that song. I can't stop listening to it. Other than that, I also want to mention Alien Superstar and Summer Renaissance. Next up at number 6 is Fossora by Bjork. I'm so excited about loving this one. As someone who loves Bjork's earlier albums and who's had a hard time with the most recent few, I love that this one clicked for me. If this album could be summarized with 2 words, they would be mushrooms and motherhood. Lyrically, it's vulnerable, it talks about her experience as a parent and even features her children, but it was also inspired by the death of her mother. However, and this kind of goes without saying since we're talking about Bjork, but this album is one of a kind. It sounds baffling in a cool way. The woodwinds make it feel natural and outdoorsy, and they work well with the mushroom theme. There are beautiful string and choral sections, but they're contrasted by a really strange industrial electronic sound. It makes me feel like I'm the main character lost in a forest in the weirdest, most nightmarish fairy tale ever. It just makes me really happy that even 30 years after her debut album, Bjork is still one of the most adventurous musicians I know of. What she does could not be replicated by anyone else. This album could have only been made by her. My favorite track is Her Mother's House. It's such a perfect, soothing closer for the album. I also love Ancestress and Fungal City. Moving on to Hellfire by Black Midi. I feel like it's hard to describe this album with words. It's the kind of music that you kind of just need to hear for yourself. It's overwhelming, it's intense, it's explosive, it's theatrical. It's kind of hard to believe that this is real music made by real people. It's absolute insanity and it sounds great. The vocal delivery is unique. It feels like someone with a very loose grasp on reality is passionately ranting at you, but it's actually enjoyable. Also, despite how wild this album can get, there are some more toned down moments that let you catch your breath before getting back into the chaos. The storytelling is another big part of what makes this so interesting. These songs are about bad people who do bad things and who are going to go to hell, as the title would suggest. The lyrics are obviously dark since they're written from the perspective of evil people, but they're also funny. It just has such a unique atmosphere to it. If this is what hell sounds like, it seems like kind of a fun time. As far as favorite tracks, I have to go with Sugar to Eat Men Eat and Welcome to Hell. Putting 3 songs that are that amazing back to back in the track list is just ridiculous. Alright, at number 4, Natural Brown Prom Queen by Sudan Archive. I went into this album with basically zero context and was immediately blown away. It's really easy to get lost in this one. Even though it's 18 tracks long, it doesn't drag at all. It's innovative, but it's also so much fun that it's still really easy to listen to. It's somehow experimental and accessible at the same time. It honestly just feels like a breath of fresh air. There's so much charisma and personality going on in this album. She just has a really enjoyable presence. It feels like she has the confidence to do and say whatever she wants, and I'm just glad I get to witness it. The vocals are beautiful, the instrumentals are vibrant. It's just such a smooth experience of an album. Also, I have to bring up the creative use of Britney's violin skills throughout the album. I really just feel like more people need to hear this album. Please check it out if you haven't already. As of right now, my favorite song is Freakalizer. I would also recommend Homemaker and Chevy S10. Number 3, Once Twice Melody by Beach House. This is definitely my most played album of 2022. It basically took over my whole year. I find this album very hypnotic. As someone with a very short attention span, I would usually really struggle with an album that's nearly 90 minutes long, but I don't struggle with this one somehow. I feel like I go into a trance when I listen to it. I put it on, I'm transported somewhere else, I blink, blank, it's over, and I want to listen to it all over again. That being said, the album is split up into 4 distinct chapters, so you can listen to them as EPs if you don't have the time or attention span for 18 tracks. That's very valid. Sometimes I find it hard to put how music makes me feel into words, but listening to this just makes me feel good. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. It makes me feel like I'm in a really nice dream. It sounds like music from another dimension. This feels like the perfect culmination of everything Beach House has done so far. It feels like a victory lap. It's definitely their most ambitious album, and I'm really curious to see where they go from here because I don't know how you follow up an album like this. I'm just really thankful for this album. It's been by my side since it came out, and it's been there for me during a really tough year, honestly. It's been a huge comfort for me, so it just has a special place in my heart. I have to go with Pink Funeral as my favorite track, considering it was my most played song of 2022. I also want to mention Superstar and New Romance. At number 2, Ants From Up Here by Black Country New Road. I feel like this is probably the most predictable album to be on this list. I get it, people have sung the praises of this album ad nauseum to the point where I feel like there's nothing unique left to say, but that's because it's great. Every part of this album feels perfectly crafted. The instrumentals are, for lack of a better word, gorgeous. The musicians are so talented and they have so much chemistry. I get it, people love to make fun of the Billie Eilish line, but the lyrics are actually really moving. The vocals are unique and maybe not for everyone, but one of the most important things for me in a vocalist is how well they convey emotions, and emotions are certainly conveyed here. This thing is really sad, but when that sadness is combined with music that sounds this grand, it feels really cathartic. It's gotten to the point where I may have developed an unhealthy emotional connection with this album. I feel like we're gonna look back on this decades from now and fondly remember the first time we heard it. I feel like it's going to age incredibly well. I was already blown away when I first heard it, but it sounds even better now. I know this has already been said a gajillion times, but it feels like a future classic for sure. The place where he inserted the blade is the best track, hands down. An embarrassing amount of liquid has poured from my tear ducts while listening to that song. Also the songs Concord and Basketball Shoes. And finally, my favorite album of the year, And in the Darkness Hearts Aglow by Weyes Blood. I had basically the highest expectations ever for this one, and it still managed to impress me. This release really solidified Weyes Blood as one of my favorite musicians ever. I love how much focus there is on Natalie's vocals because she has one of my favorite voices ever. She sounds incredible and she makes it seem effortless, but don't get me wrong, the sound of this album is absolutely enchanting. I could try to describe how beautiful this music is, but there's no way I could do it justice. There are definitely hints of darkness, both in the instrumentals and in the lyrics, but overall this is just such a soothing experience. It feels weird to say that this music makes me feel safe because I don't even really know how that works, but it does. It feels like I can get away from whatever's going on and escape from it all when I listen to this. It's like a really soft, warm blanket. It's hard to describe. I see people comparing Weyes Blood to other musicians all the time, and it's time to cut it out. She's in a lane of her own. Her music touches something in me that nobody else really can. Considering this is the second album in a trilogy, and the first two are some of my favorite albums to have ever been made, I guess you could say I'm excited for the third. Whenever it comes. Trying to pick a favorite song from this album is like picking a favorite child, but I'm gonna go with God Turned Me Into a Flower. The buildup of that song is soul-crushing. It's a masterpiece. I'd also recommend the songs Hearts Aglow and Grapevine, and also all of them. And that's all. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said earlier, definitely feel free to let me know what your favorite albums of the year are. I would love to know. The playlist of my favorite tracks will be linked in the description. If you haven't heard any of these albums, I would obviously highly recommend checking them out. As always, feel free to subscribe if you're interested. My social media will be linked in the description, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.